back in that day, there weren't phones and fax machines, but he sent a, now here's my mind's blank. Telegram, thank you, you win. You win a free tour to Israel next year just because, no, I'm just kidding. No, I take that back, I can't do that. All right, so they sent a telegram to London and he said, what should I do? And the minister had heard John Hilton talk about this, and the minister was good friends with the fellow at the telegraph office, and they gave him this verse. Allenby got this verse of Scripture, and because this verse of Scripture, let me tell you what Allenby did. Here's the Scripture, Isaiah 31, 4 through 5. As young lions roar and young lion over his prey, when a multitude of shepherds is summoned against him, he'll not be afraid of their voice, nor be disturbed by their noise. So the Lord of hosts will come down to fight from Mount Zion, and for its hill. Here it is. Like birds flying about, so the Lord of hosts will defend Jerusalem. Defending, he will also pass over it, and he will preserve it. So the birds flying was the key. So Allenby had an idea. He had some leaflets printed out telling the Turks to surrender Jerusalem, all right? And when he signed his name, he signed it Allenby. But he did it in their language, not the English language. So when these scout planes fly over and these leaflets are dropping in Jerusalem and they pick them up and read it, they read it in their language, but when they got to the bottom part of the name, it did not read Allenby, it read Allah Nebi. And they read it Allah Nebi, and Allah Nebi is God's prophet. And the 10th, isn't that something? And the 10th century poets' idea came that there would be God's prophet that would deliver the city, and the Turks surrendered Jerusalem to Allenby, who was riding on a horse and stepped off of it coming through the gate. But when they saw him on the horse, all the Arab Christians back then started calling him God's prophet. And on December 9th, 1917, Allenby walked into the city of Jerusalem, and it occurred, this is so neat, God always does this stuff on Jewish feast days or something. It occurred on the first day of Hanukkah, which is the celebration that Jews celebrate every year, commemorating how the temple was delivered from the hands of the Greeks and from Antiochus Epiphanes, and the supernatural miracle of the oil. And it happened at that particular time. So the Turks had been in control of Israel for 400 years, and on that day God used a scripture and several British people to link them all together to see this amazing prophecy come to pass. Now, let me give you a couple more contemporary prophecies. You will read Nahum chapter 2 and verse 4, the following passage. The chariots shall rage in the streets, they shall jostle one another in the broadways, they shall seem like torches, they shall run like lightnings. Joel chapter 2 and verse 5 says this, like the noise of chariots on the top of mountains they shall leap, like the noise of flame of fire that devoureth the stubble, as a strong people set in battle array. Now, in both of these passages, it mentions the word chariots, right? However, we don't use chariots today. So when you're looking at this, there's two different Hebrew words for chariot. This Hebrew word found in Nahum is the word recheb, and the word found in Joel 2 and 5, listen to this, like the noise of chariots on the top of the mountains, they leap, like the noise of a flame that devoureth the stubble. So he's describing something here called a chariot that leaps and shoots a flame out, all right? And the Hebrew word there is Merkabah. Here is what is interesting to show you how Old Testament truth can be contemporary. The Israelis have a chariot, a tank that is the best tank probably made in the world, and the Hebrew name of the tank is Merkabah, which is made to leap on the hills over those rocks. Oh, you'll get this in a minute. And when it shoots, you know, if you've ever seen a tank shoot a missile, there's a little bit of sometimes a flame that looks like, and smoke that comes out of it. And so this could actually, in Joel, be a description of not just Old Testament chariots, but an actual weapon that, a tank, I should say, that the Israelis have. Here's another verse. In Jeremiah chapter 50, verse 11, there's a prophecy against Babylon. And what's interesting, I flew with the rabbi. I was in Bucharest, Hungary, and a rabbi got on the plane with me many years ago. In fact, it was right before the first Gulf War, and he began to read to me from Isaiah chapter 51. He said, you do realize that the Babylon mentioned by the prophet Jeremiah has not been destroyed the way that Jeremiah predicted. And he read this verse, make bright the arrows, gather the shields, the Lord hath raised up the spirit of the kings of the Medes, for his device is against Babylon, to destroy it, because it is the vengeance of the Lord, the vengeance of his temple. And when he read this, he said, what do you think about a bright arrow? And I said, well, to me that means an arrow that's set on fire and you shoot it. He said, no, it's a missile. And I said, wow, no, that's interesting. And then he began to describe to me, these guys go into Hebrew words, and according to Maimonides, and according to Rabbi Shmuel, and, I'm just saying, yeah, okay, whatever you say. And so he got me so deep, I got lost in the water somewhere and almost drowned. But I was so intrigued by that for the longest time, because I said, wow. Now, here's what I want to show you. You're going to love this. When in the Gulf War, you'll remember Saddam Hussein sent Scud missiles in, right? Remember? All right. And the United States had a battery system developed in which it would intercept those missiles, right? Well, everything looked great, but in reality, it didn't do the job that we thought it was going to do. There was some mistakes there. So the Israelis took some money that the United States gave them and developed a system, watch this, which can now intercept missiles that would come from the old territory of Persia or Babylon. And that system is called the Arrow. Called the Arrow. And wait a minute, and then the little missile that comes out of the Merkaba tank is called the Arrow. So in other words, if we're going to the Old Testament and we're reading these scriptures that seem very strange to us today, please understand that some of the very Hebrew words or words used in the text are actually weapons that are being invented today here in Israel that have the same name of those Old Testament weapons that were used in the Old Testament time. One more verse. I'm going to be very careful sharing the information. In fact, I'm going to just read the verse and just give you a statement without sharing everything on television that we actually know. Zechariah chapter 14, verse 12. And this is the plague wherewith the Lord will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh will dissolve while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets, and their tongue shall dissolve in their mouth. Now, this, many people, I remember I mentioned this one time in a meeting, a lady said to me, she says, I know this could be a weapon of some kind, but she says, I believe that's just the coming of the Lord that's going to destroy the armies with the brightness of His coming. I say, I totally agree with that, but notice this, that there is a weapon. And of course, everybody denies it exists, and they say, well, we know that exists in technicality only. But all I'm going to say is the weapon does exist, and it's called a neutron bomb. And what a neutron bomb basically does is exactly what you would see here. Once it goes off, now this is going to sound like I'm making this up, but I'm not. It actually takes the skin off a person completely, but leaves their clothes on. So in other words, the person is a skeleton, but sometimes their clothes remain, or the vehicle they're riding in, it consumes them, but that the vehicle itself could even remain intact. So all I'm going to say is modern weapons are now being invented that actually can fulfill Bible prophecy. Now here's one that was reported. I always like to tell you when it was reported. Iran's long-range missiles, November the 2nd, 2008. Now, they have a missile which is called the Sajil, which is a high-speed missile that can go a 1,200-mile range and can actually reach Israel and now reach Europe. And, of course, the world is very concerned about this now. Now, the word Sajil means baked clay. Why would the Iranians invent a missile and call it baked clay? Because of a statement made in the Quran. The Quran, of course, are the words of Islam's founder, Muhammad. He tells a story of God driving off an enemy that was attacking Mecca by pelting them with baked stones of baked clay. So in other words, just like the Israelis are taking scriptures, and I'm not saying they're doing it because of scripture, but somebody has to be, and they're taking weapons and naming them the names that are found in the Bible. So some of the Muslim nations are taking weapons that they're making and naming them names based in the Quran. You see how powerful prophecy is? Even in all realms, whether it's Jewish or Christian or Islam, it's a very powerful thing. Now here's one that I read right before this trip. There's a Shahab 3 missile that can eventually carry a nuclear warhead. And their name means a shooting star or a falling star or a meteor. Now, this could add a twist. I'm saying it could. It could add a twist to this verse, Matthew 24 and 29. The powers of heaven shall be shaken. Heaven, Oranos, where we get a word uranium from, the powers of heaven shall be shaken, and the stars shall fall from heaven. In other words, we've always felt, and I believe we can take it literal. I don't want anybody saying, you're not taking the Bible literal. No, I do. I believe we can take it literal that there's going to be meteorites because the Bible said a great star fell from heaven. In the book of Revelation, that's the word aster, where we get the word asteroid, and it hits somewhere and it pollutes a large percentage of the water. So we know by the Bible that there's going to be actual stars fall from heaven, or meteorites or asteroids in time to come.